What is up, my fellow watchers? I'm Richard Kobe Hibbert, and can you guess who I'm dressed as? That's right, Mr. Conductor from Shining Time Station. Today, I'll be ranking each episode of Thomas and Friends from the classic era, which will be seasons 1 through 7 of course, and I honestly grew up with those seasons along with season 8, the last good season of Thomas in my opinion, because starting in season 9 and onwards, that's when the series started to have more bad episodes, such as Edward Strikes Out and Don't Be Silly Billy for example. But nevertheless, this is the classic era that I'll be ranking today. One of the things that I like about the classic era is that we had 5 really useful narrators that captured our childhoods, such as Ringo Starr, George Carlin, Alec Baldwin, Michael Angeles, and Michael Brandon. Now, I will be ranking each episode in the order by the original UK release date, which I usually like listing TV episodes and movies in chronological order, and each episode will be ranked with a scale from 0 to 10. Okay, we'll be starting things off with Season 1, the start of the TV series, narrated by both Ringo Starr and George Carlin for American releases. And now, off we go!
Gordon's chance had come. Come on, Puff Gordon to the coaches. The train went faster and faster, too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't. Peep, peep, stop, stop! Hurry, 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 laughed Gordon. You can't get away, laughed the coaches. Poor Thomas was going faster than he had ever gone before. He was out of breath and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on. I shall never be the same again, he thought sadly. My wheels will be quite worn out. At last they stopped at a station.
"I'm ready," said Edward. "No good," grumbled Gordon. They pulled and pushed as hard as they could. "I can't do it! I can't do it! I can't do it!" puffed Gordon. "I will do it! I will do it! I will do it!" puffed Edward. Edward pushed and puffed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could. And almost before he realized it, Gordon found himself at the top of the hill. "I've done it! I've done it! I've done it!" he said proudly. He forgot all about kind Edward and didn't say thank you. Edward was left out of breath and far behind, but he was happy because he had been so helpful. At the next station, he found that the driver and fireman were very pleased with him.
They took up the old rails and built a wall in front of Henry, so that other engines wouldn't bump into him. All Henry could do was to watch the trains rushing through the other tunnel. He was very sad because he thought no one would ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again. "Peep, peep, peep," said Henry, "so am I. Pull hard, we'll do it. Pull hard, we'll do it." They puffed together. "We've done it together, we've done it together," said Edward and Henry. "You've done it, hooray! You've done it, hooray!" sang the coaches. Everyone was excited. Sir Topham Hatt leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry. But the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field, where a goat ate it for tea. They never stopped till they came to the station at the end of the line.
"Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. "People have never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of them to wave. and he whistled. Beep, beep. Thank you. Then he came to a signal at danger. Bother, he thought. I must stop. And I was going so nicely, too. What a nuisance signals are. He blew an angry beep, beep on his whistle. The signalman ran up. Hello, Thomas, he said. What are you doing here? I'm pulling a train, said Thomas. Can't you see? Where are your coaches, then? Thomas looked back. Why, bless me, he said, if we haven't left them behind. No, 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 answered the cars, bumping into each other. Go on, go on. Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. Stop pushing, he hissed. But the cars took no notice. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. There's the station. Oh, dear, what shall I do? Cried Thomas. They rattled straight through and swerved into the goods yard. Thomas shut his eyes. I must stop. When he opened his eyes, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers. They left the broken cars. Then, with 2 cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. Hurry, 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 puffed James. You're going too fast, replied the coaches. James laughed and tried to go faster, but the coaches wouldn't let him. We're going to stop. What's the matter? James asked his driver. The brakes are on. Leak in the pipe, most likely. You've banged the coaches enough to make a leak in anything. At last, they saw Gordon's Hill. Look out for trouble, James, warned his driver. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Don't let them stop you. So James went faster. Soon they were halfway up. I'm doing it, he panted. Will the top never come? Then, with a sudden jerk, it all came easier. I've done it! Hooray! It's easy now! But his driver shut off steam. They've done it again! We've left our tail behind, look! The last cars were running backwards down the hill. The coupling had snapped. But the conductor stopped the cars and got out to warn approaching engines. That's why it was easy, said James, as he backed the other cars carefully down. What silly things freight cars are! There might have been an accident. Come along, puffed James. You're pulling us well, sang the coaches. Hurry, puffed James. Bridges and stations flashed by. The passengers cheered, and they soon reached the station. Everyone said thank you to James, and Sir Topham Hatt was very impressed.
The conductor blew his whistle, and Thomas started so quickly that he left him behind. The conductor waved his red flag to stop Thomas, but he was well on his way, steaming out of the station. Come along, puffed Thomas. But Clarabelle didn't want to come. I've lost my nice conductor, she sobbed. Annie tried to tell Thomas what had happened. We haven't a conductor. But he was hurrying and wouldn't listen. Annie and Clarabelle tried to put on their brakes, but they couldn't without the conductor. Where is our conductor? They cried. But Thomas didn't stop till they came to a signal. The driver told them what had happened. So the feed pipe is blocked, said the inspector. I'll just look in the tanks. He climbed up and peered in. Then he came down. Excuse me, sir. Please look in the tank and tell me what you see. Certainly, Inspector, replied Sir Topham Hatt. He clambered up, looked in, and nearly fell off in surprise. "Inspector," he whispered, "can you see fish?" Gracious goodness me, how did the fish get there, driver?
And then, who should come to Thomas's rescue but Terence? Snow never worries him. He pulled the empty coaches away, then came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and tugged, and at last dragged Thomas clear of the snow, ready for the journey home. As they crossed the bridge, they heard an impatient honk, honk. There was Bertie waiting at the traffic lights. He started with a roar and chased on after Thomas again. Now Thomas reached his full speed. Bertie tried hard, but Thomas was too fast. Whistling triumphantly, he plunged into the tunnel, leaving Bertie toiling far behind. "We've done it! We've done it!" panted Thomas. "We've done it, hooray! We've done it, hooray!" chanted Annie and Clarabelle as they whooshed into the last station. I mustn't stick, thought James. He stopped on just the right place to balance the table. It could now swing easily. Gordon arrived in time to see everything. James turned much too easily. The wind puffed him round like a top. He couldn't stop. "Oh, sir. Yes, sir. That's a good engine. I'll call you Percy." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." And Sir Topham Hatt brought Percy back to the yard. "Edward," he called, "here's Percy. Will you show him everything?" Percy soon learned what he had to do, and they had a happy afternoon. Then Henry came by, hissing as usual. Whoosh went Percy. Henry jumped and ran back to the shed. "How beautifully you wheeshed him," laughed Edward. "I can't wheesh like that." "Oh," said Percy, "that's nothing. You should hear them in the workshop. You have to wheesh loudly to make yourself heard." After that, he was tired, but he couldn't stop. He had no driver to shut off steam and apply the brakes. "I want to stop! I want to stop!" he puffed. The man in the signal box saw Percy was in trouble, so he kindly set the switch. Percy puffed wearily onto a nice empty siding, ending in a big bank of earth. He was too tired now to care where he went. "I want to stop! I want to stop!" "I have stopped," he puffed thankfully. When the Welsh coal came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited. "Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow." They carefully made his fire, putting large lumps of coal like a wall round the outside. Then the glowing middle part was covered with smaller lumps. You're spoiling my fire, complained Henry. Wait and see, said the fireman. We'll have a roaring fire just when we want it. Come on, don't be silly, puffed Henry to the freight cars. The cars shuddered and groaned. Trickety-trock, all right. That's better, puffed Henry. Clouds of smoke and steam poured from his funnel into the cold air, and the fire's light shone brightly. Hurry, panted Henry. They were going well. The light grew better. Signal lights shone green as they passed. Then a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. All clear, Henry. Away we go. Soon they could see the boys, and they all had stones. Are you ready, Henry? Said the driver. Sneeze hard when I tell you. Now, he said. Achoo! Well done, Henry, laughed his driver. What is your name? Asked Sir Topham Hatt. Toby, sir. Thank you, Toby, for a very nice ride. Thank you, sir, said Toby. He felt better now. This gentleman, he thought, is a gentleman who knows how to speak to engines. The children came every day for 2 weeks. Sometimes they rode with the conductor, sometimes in empty cars. On the last day of all, the driver invited them into his cab. Sir Topham Hatt spoke to the policeman. But however much he argued with him, it was no good. The law is the law, he said, and we can't change it. Sir Topham Hatt felt exhausted. I'm sorry, driver, he said. It's no use arguing with policemen. We will have to make those cowcatcher things for Thomas, I suppose. Everyone will laugh, sir, said Thomas. They'll say I look like a tram. Sir Topham Hatt stared. Then he laughed. Well done, Thomas. Why didn't I think of it before? We need a tram engine. When I was on my holiday, I met a nice little engine called Toby. He takes freight cars from the farms, but the trucks are taking over most of his work and he needs a change. On, yelled the cars. I've got to stop, groaned James. Disaster lay ahead. Something sticky splashed all over James. He had run into 2 tar wagons and was black from smokebox to cab. He was more dirty than hurt. But the tar wagons and some cars were all to pieces. Toby and Percy were sent to help and came as quickly as they could. He moved slowly forward to jam the table, but he couldn't stop himself and slithered into a ditch. Whoosh! He hissed. Get me out! Get me out! Not a hope, said his driver and fireman. You're stuck, you silly great engine. Don't you understand that? Now for my plan, thought Thomas. Bumping the cars fiercely, he jerked his driver off the footplate and followed them into the siding. Come back, yelled his driver. Fire and smoke, said Thomas. I'm sunk. And he was. Oh dear, he said, I am a silly engine. Mrs. Kindly especially thanked the smaller engines. Thomas and Toby are old friends, she said. And now, Percy, you are my friend, too. Percy was very pleased. 3 cheers for Mrs. Kindly, he called. Beep, beep, beep. They all whistled. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Now that we finished Season 1, we're ready to kick things off with Season 2, which was also narrated by both Ringo Starr and George Carlin for American releases, although some of the episodes from this season were only narrated by George Carlin for the US. Oh, and speaking of which, I forgot to say that Whistles and Sneezes from Season 1 was only narrated by George Carlin for the US as well, since that episode never aired on US television until 1991. Anyways, this season introduced us to some new characters such as Trevor the Traction Engine, Duck the Great Western Engine, Harold the Helicopter, Diesel, Don the Douglas, Daisy the Diesel Railcar, Boko, and of course, Bill and Ben. This was also the first season to have an actual Halloween themed episode, which is the one and only Percy's Ghostly Trick, or Ghost Train, whichever title you guys prefer. I, for one, prefer knowing the episodes by US title since I grew up in the USA. Okay, here we go. Time to start ranking the episodes from the final season that was produced in the 1980s.
And by the way, went on Thomas, those buffers don't look very safe to me. The last load poured down. Help, help, cried Thomas. Get me out! Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smokebox to bunker. Ha ha! Chuckled Percy. You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful. I'm not disgraceful, choked Thomas. You did that on purpose. Get me out. Everyone tried to send her away, but she wouldn't go. Henry arrived. What's this? A cow? I'll soon settle her. Be off! Be off! Henry backed away nervously. I don't want to hurt her. This hill is too steep, this hill is too steep, grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Beep, whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. The conductor blew the whistle and Edward's driver looked back, but the flag didn't wave. Then he heard Bertie. Everything seemed to happen at once, and the station master told the conductor and driver what had happened. The vicar and his two boys arrived that evening. Trevor hadn't felt so happy for months. He chuffered about the yard.
Show your paces, Trevor,
said the vicar. Later, he came out of the office smiling.
I've got him cheap, Jem, cheap. Do you hear that, Trevor?
Cried Jem.
The Reverend saved you, and you live at the vicarage now.
Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, he caught up with James. Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engines swayed and lurched. At last, got him, he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. Trevor was as good as his word. He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position.
Who needs rails?
He muttered cheerfully to himself. Later, Thomas brought Annie and Clarabelle to visit him. Thomas was most impressed. He came to a signal.
Bother, it's a danger.
The signal moved to show line clear. Its arm moved up instead of down. Percy had never seen that sort of signal before. Down means go, and up means stop. So upper still must mean go back. I know, it's one of those backing signals. Come on, Percy, said his driver. Off we go. Stop! You're going the wrong way. But it's a backing signal, Percy protested and told him about Gordon and James. The driver laughed and explained. Oh, dear, said Percy. 2 engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly doing his work.
He seems a simple sort of engine. We'll have some fun and order him about. Quack, 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 whoosh!
Smoke billowed everywhere. Percy pounded along. The cars screamed and swayed. Well, I'll be a ding-dong-dang, said the driver. There was Harold. The race was on. Go it, Percy, he yelled. You're gaining. Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. Hurry, 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 he panted to the cars. We don't want to, they grumbled. It was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The firemen shoveled for dear life. Well done, Percy, shouted the driver. We're gaining. We're going ahead. Oh, good boy, good boy. The inspector had made a plan, and together they took off into the sky. At last, Thomas was tiring. I need to stop, he panted wearily. As they neared the next station, Thomas saw Harold land. They entered the platform slowly enough for the inspector to act. Judging his moment, the inspector scrambled into the cab and screwed the brakes on. At last, Thomas stopped. Both he and the inspector were very relieved. Then they thanked Harold. Go on, they yelled and bumped Percy's driver and fireman off the footplate. Ow, said Percy, sliding past the board. Percy was frantic. That's enough! Percy was sunk. All the cars were laughing and singing at him. Cars are waiting in the yard, tackling them with ease. Oh, show the world what I can do, gaily boasts the diesel. In and out he creeps about like a big black weasel. When he pulls the wrong cars out, pop goes the diesel. Next day he spoke to the cars. I see you like jokes. You made a good joke about me yesterday. I laughed and laughed. Duck told me one about Gordon. I'll whisper it. Don't tell Gordon I told you.
And he sniggered away.
Ha, 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 guffawed the cars. Gordon will be cross with Duck when he knows. Let's tell him and get back at Duck for bumping us. They laughed rudely at the engines as they went by. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the cars. "It's too late!" Duck groaned. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer. The silly cars had knocked their conductor off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled the warning. But the cars didn't care. They were feeling very pleased with themselves. "Beg pardon, sir," gasped Duck. "Excuse my intrusion."
No, I won't,
said the barber.
"You've frightened my customers. I'll teach you."
And he lathered Duck's face all over. Poor Duck. Suddenly, Thomas saw Bertie ahead. His radiator was steaming. "What's the matter?" asked Thomas. "You should be at the station by now. You're late." "I feel dreadful," moaned Bertie. "All upset inside, and driver says he can't make me better." "Thank goodness you're late, too. Can you take my passengers, please? They'll never get home otherwise." "Of course," agreed Thomas. He now felt sorry for Bertie and promised to get help at the next station. Thomas set off again. Already he felt much more cheerful, and Bertie's passengers, traveling in Annie and Clarabelle, all reached home safely.
Slowly but surely, the snorting engines forced the freight cars up the hill. But James was losing steam.
"I can't do it! I can't do it!" "Leave it to me!" shouted Douglas. The conductor was anxious.
"Go steady! The van's breaking!"
The van was in pieces. No one had been hurt, and soon Edward came to clear the mess. Later, Sir Topham Hatt spoke to the engines. "I had a deputation. I understand your feelings, and I've given a lot of thought to the matter." He paused impressively. "Donald and Douglas, I hear that your work in the snow was good. You shall have a new coat of paint." The twins were surprised.
"Thank ye, sir."
"But your names will be painted on you. We'll have no more mistakes."
"Thank ye, sir."
He soon found his mistake. He tried to whoosh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. He didn't dare look at what was coming next. There was the station master's house. The station master was about to have breakfast. "Horrors!" cried Thomas, and shut his eyes. The house rocked, broken glass tinkled, plaster was everywhere. "It's Fitter's orders," she said. "What is?" "My Fitter's a very nice man. He comes every week and examines me carefully. 'Daisy,' he says, 'never pull. You're highly sprung, and pulling is bad for your swerves.'" "So that's how it is," finished Daisy. "Stuff and nonsense," said the station master. "I can't understand," said the shunter. "Whatever made Sir Topham Hatt send us such a feeble—" Feeble, spluttered Daisy. "Let me—" "Stop arguing," grumbled the passengers. "We're late already." The man on duty at the crossing rushed to warn traffic with his red flag, but was too late to switch Percy to the runaway siding. Frantically trying to grip the rails, Percy slid into the yard. "Beep, beep! Look out!" The brake van was in smithereens. Percy's driver and fireman had jumped clear, but Percy was stranded. He ran back and hid behind the cars on the other side. Ben now came forward. "Car stealer?" hissed Ben. He ran away too. Bill took his place. This went on and on till the diesel's eyes nearly popped out. "Stop! You're making me giddy." The two engines gazed at him. "Are there two of you?" "Yes, we're twins." "I might have known it." "If it isn't, Gordon," said Ben, "it's just a pile of old iron, which we'd better take to the scrapyard." "No, Bill, this lot's useless for scrap. We'll take it to the harbor and dump it in the sea." Gordon was alarmed. "I am Gordon! Stop! Stop!" When Boko suddenly arrived, Gordon thought him the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. "Boko, my dear engine, save me!" Boko quickly sized up the situation and threatened to take away the cars he had brought for Bill and Ben. This made the twins behave at once. "Come on," he puffed and moved cautiously forward. The first coach moving helped to start the second, and the second helped the third. "I've done it! I've done it!" puffed Edward. "Steady, boy," warned his driver. "Well done, boy! You've got them! You've got them!" And he listened happily to Edward's steady beat as he forged slowly but surely ahead. At last, battered, weary, but unbeaten, Edward steamed in. Henry was waiting for the visitors with the special train. Beep, beep. Beep, 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 beep. "Let me in! Let me in!" wailed Percy. "No, no, not by the smoke on my chimney, chim. I'll chuff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in." "Oh, dear," exclaimed Thomas. "It's getting late. Oh, I'd no idea. Oh, I must find Annie and Clarabelle." Everyone was waiting. Thomas seethed impatiently. 10 minutes late. I warned him. Passengers will complain. And Sir Topham Hatt. Then they all saw Percy. They laughed and shouted. "Sorry I'm late," Percy panted. "Look what's crawled out of the hay," teased Thomas. "What's wrong?" asked Percy. "Talk about hairy caterpillars," puffed Thomas. "It's worth being late to have seen you." Percy and Toby smiled. They knew who it was. With landing lights shining brightly, Harold the helicopter touched down gently in the snow. Bringing the greatest surprise of all, Santa Claus. Everyone cheered and the party began. "It's no fun getting stuck in the snow," whispered Thomas to Percy, "but it was worth it for this party. Happy holiday, Percy. Happy holiday, everyone."
Alright then, now that we finished the first 2 seasons of the TV series, we'll be closing out this part of the video since I'm only doing this video in separate parts so that I'll still have plenty of room for my computer space. I hope you all enjoyed the video so far, the first part at least, and I'll see you all in the next part of this video, so stay tuned